Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I ask leave of the Federation Chamber to amend Notice Number 3, Private Members' Business, in the terms as circulated.
Is leave granted? Yes.
I move Notice Number 3 as amended, relating to ISIL's crimes against the Yazidis in the terms as circulated. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Today I want to speak about the recent events that have occurred in Syria and Iraq with respect to Yazidis. The recent military defeat of ISIL allows for some reflection on the atrocities inflicted by Islamic extremism over the past 4 years in Syria and Iraq. In particular, the Yazidi people of northeastern Iraq have been subjected to extraordinary violence inflicted by ISIL. The Yazidi were actively hunted by ISIL. Massacres of civilians, including women and children, were widely reported as ISIL assaulted Iraq in 2014. They surrounded fleeing Yazidi on Mount Sinjar and attempted to starve them out. There have been many reports of surviving women and children also being abducted by ISIL forces and sold into slavery. The violence and horror of these stories appall me, as it should every member of this chamber. A 20-year-old woman beaten and raped multiple times a day for months, taking entire villages and shooting all but the young women, who were then sexually assaulted by ISIL fighters. Women, and indeed young girls, being sold and traded amongst ISIL fighters like objects. Survivors managed to flee any way they could, and some who have since resettled in Australia have told their story. I encountered the human face of one of these stories last year when I met and spoke with a Yazidi survivor, Nihad. At the age of 15, she was captured on the way to Mount Sinjar, fleeing from ISIL fighters. Her sister was raped in front of her, and she was sold to an ISIL fighter. She was then raped and beaten repeatedly. When the fighter died in combat, she was sold to a man she referred to as a monster, who kept her and other Yazidi girls as slaves. Nihad was further raped and beaten and then fell pregnant. Nihad gave birth to her son in July 2015. When she managed to escape, she was unable to take her young baby with her, and the baby was forced to remain with the father, a member of ISIL. She's never seen the baby again. Since listening to the horror inflicted on Nihad, I've also learnt some other stories of some Yazidi victims who have also settled here in Australia. Kudida Omar Kulo now lives in Toowoomba, but in 2014 his village was assaulted at 2 a.m. by ISIL, and he and his family had to flee 25 kilometres to Mount Sinjar while being fired upon. His brother and their family also fled, but did not arrive at the mountain. They have not been heard from since. Kudida and his family were trapped on Mount Sinjar for 9 days with little food or water. Due to their desperate situation, in order to escape, they decided to attempt to walk from Mount Sinjar to Kurdistan. Luckily, they came across a Kurdish convoy who were able to ferry them to a refugee camp. Furthermore, his daughter and 2 of his grandchildren were captured by ISIL and sold to a terrorist. Kudida spent months negotiating with the terrorist to flee his daughter and grandchildren and had to pay a ransom in order to free them. He then had to pay smugglers to rescue his daughter and grandchildren. Sadly, Kudida's story is not unique. Another man, now living in New South Wales, fled from an assault on his village with his wife and children. They spent 4 days trapped on Mount Sinjar with very little food and needing to walk 8 hours to get any water. To escape, they had to travel through ISIL-controlled areas to another town, Kursi, past victims and people dying from starvation and dehydration. After staying in Kursi for 3 days, this family tried to escape from Kursi into Syria. Thousands of Yazidi walked for hours in darkness with injuries, illness and bleeding feet to a Kurdish-controlled area. Such was their fear that when they first found Kurdish forces, people screamed in terror as they thought they had been found by ISIL. Instead, they finally received food, water and shelter and transport to freedom. Sadly, these stories are from survivors, those who have managed to escape from ISIL. Moreover, these are a small sample of the horrors suffered by the Yazidi. The Yazidi were specifically targeted by ISIL, forced from their homes, and if captured, they were often executed or sold into slavery. Many have labelled these crimes genocide, and this is what this motion here today presents to this Parliament, and I look forward to the further debate on this motion.